Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Joselina Peralta, founder and CEO of STRACTIX. It's great to be here this afternoon with you. And the topic that I want to unpack, I think it's very relevant nowadays. So by show of hands, I'm just curious before I start, how many head of procurements or CPOs or vice president of procurements are in the room this afternoon with us? Okay, I see a few hands. Definitely a few hands. Okay, great. What about chief supply chain officers or leaders in supply chain? Anybody? No? Okay. So let's just maybe get started. When we actually think about partnerships and we think about what actually the future of the advantage is, it's interesting times that we actually live in. So the fundamental idea that I wanted to introduce today is that most of the supplier relationships that we have, they're not treated as partners. They're actually treated more as vendors. Does that make sense? And essentially, when we think about how do we can transform what is actually happening today, is to introduce a different idea and a different problem in mind, which is a partnership. Today, most companies, they focus on a very subservient type of relationship with their suppliers. It's essentially something that it has been by design, because when we think about why the relationships are not flowing with vendors and essentially not allies, is rooted in a hard truth. Essentially, most companies don't want to relinquish control. When we think about this, it's rooted back by design, how the procurement function was actually started. So one of the things that we did back in 2023 is that we actually had a cross-functional and cross-industry benchmark of 4,500 companies in North America and in Europe. And we find that 72% of procurement leaders essentially still rank cost reduction as the #1 KPI, despite volatility, disruption, and demand for agility. So one of the things that we thought that it was interesting is that outdated model stifles collaboration. So we are still stuck in this transactional loop where essentially procurement leaders still negotiate price instead of unlocking value. So now you might be thinking, so if this is so obvious that treating our partners, our vendors, our partners actually unlock different outcomes, why not many companies are actually doing that? The answer is a little bit uncomfortable. It's a function of control. So procurement systems were built to maintain order, to enforce compliance, standardize cost, minimizing risk. But that structure was never built to actually create trust. It was designed to maintain a hierarchy and to keep suppliers subservient. It was never meant to actually unlock conversations where there was actually collaboration. In 2023, we actually led a survey that we look at the SRM, supplier relationship managers, and 67% said that they don't feel empowered to co-innovate with their buyers, even when invited to the table. Why? Because essentially it screams control and not collaboration, that model. And in a world that rewards speed, innovation, the control mindset doesn't scale. It actually slows us down, and worse, it's making us fragile. So the good news is that we're entering a new era. When we think about the Chief Procurement Officer, it's not just about pricing officer. In today's, the most effective leaders, they actually look at procurement as the partnership gateway. So your Chief Procurement Officer now should stand for your Chief Partnership Officer. Orchestrating ecosystems, deciding them not just to negotiate deals, but to actually unlock value. So according to 2024, a procurement trend report, 61% of CPOs said that supplier collaboration was critical to enterprise innovation. Yet, only 30% said that they had a formal strategy to actually accomplish that. Isn't that interesting? So this mindset shift. Your ecosystem is your pipeline. And in a fast-moving market where organizations can only respond quickly, they cannot do it alone. In order to do that, leaders must leverage the network and the capabilities of their partner suppliers. Thinking about companies like Apple, Unilever, those are great examples on how they get it right. They leverage their R&D function, not only for collaboration, but also for sustainability. And if you think about other companies' examples, also Unilever with Diversey, when there actually was trying to not only share goals, but share a mission to reduce water in their manufacturing sites. Another excellent example is what Procter & Gamble has done with Walmart. When you think about collaboration, it cannot be just sustained on cost efficiencies alone. You actually have to share data. You have to share resources. You have to share infrastructure. If you think about Cisco and Schneider, for example, they actually share not only IoT, but they also share infrastructure and technology. So when you build for your end customer alongside your partners, you actually do scale and accelerate to market faster. So when you think about, let's kind of fast forward a little bit. So when pressure hits every time, partnership wins. Some of the most interesting examples that we actually have during crisis, companies actually that leverage and integrate with their partner suppliers rebounds 3 times faster than the ones that they don't, or the ones that they relied with traditional sourcing models. So essentially, this is a few examples of real companies that actually we have worked with, where as we actually work with them to actually change their partnership infrastructure, we not only unlock tremendous value and efficiencies, but also we saw how those relationships actually came together. So every time when there's a crisis, when there's a pressure, partnerships always win. In 2 years ago, we actually saw the semiconductor crisis with shortages. And partnership did create flexibility, insight, and speed. So now, if we look at everything that is happening right now with tariff volatility, with geopolitical issues, when we actually see what the future, not only economically, but geopolitically is going to look like, when we're also looking at what is happening with the climate crisis, environmentally. If you guys remember at the beginning of the year, how many events did we actually face? California, we had earthquakes in Indonesia. We have actually 15 times more events compared to the same time last year. So a lot of issues happening, and yet the only thing that I think it's important at this point is that we are at a point where it's no longer optional. We can no longer say, hey, I'm going to try to develop this supplier into a partnership, maybe to see if it works. That's not a true investment. That, again, is a function of control. So if you really look at where we are right now, we are truly at an inflection point where we can actually decide how we're going to shape that future, and not only how we're going to shift into not only saying it as a nice buzzword, but to actually mean it. So the future currency isn't just tech, isn't geographical even. The truly advantage of the future is partnership. Why? Because no technological advance, not geographical position advance, will actually serve you if your ecosystem cannot move with you. I'm going to repeat that. There's not going to be a competitive advantage if your ecosystem cannot move with you. So when you look at the stats from the World Economic Forum in 2024, the collaborative value networks rank as the #1 differentiator for resilience and growth in various sectors: healthcare, logistics, manufacturing. So companies who have time and time again collaborate deeply and integrated with their suppliers, transition the shift from suppliers to partners, they outperform the rest. So, one of the things that I really, really want you guys to live this conversation that we're having right now with is that we need to reframe what procurement actually is. For once and for all, procurement and supply chain are the driver of growth. Truly, a growth engine for innovation and resilience. So here's my call to you. As leaders of procurement, supply chain, leaders in your respective functions, who you're going to be? Be the leader that transforms suppliers into strategic allies. Build partnerships that powers the next wave of value creation. At STRACTIX, we're ready to help you, to lead that shift. So if you're ready, let's talk. Let's build it. Let's do it together. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the room immediately? I know I've got some. First of all, I will start with one about, we're saying there needs to be that change of perspective from CPO, meaning Chief Partnership Officer. Internally, how do you go about creating that kind of culture within an organization to make that acceptable, to make people view that role differently?
Oh, I love that, Neil. So one of the things that is super important, procurement and the procurement organization, and especially the CPO, are in a privileged position. They touch every department, every function of the organization internally, right? So if that's not the case, if you don't have access to those meetings where the decisions and the conversations are happening, you have to really bring that intelligence and that information to create that runway to those meetings, to that access, that in case if that's not your situation for specific companies. But in reality, you broker with intelligence, with data, and then you bring the outside world into your company. That's for the internal stakeholder alignment. For the external side, you know what your company needs. You already know the strategy, what the future actually holds, the level of investment, directionally, where they're actually going. So you're probably in the most important position to actually broker those deals externally and to actually power growth. Meaning, part of the conversations with our suppliers should be focused on where are you growing? What's your strategy? What's your asset-based strategy? So you go faster when you actually join forces, when you co-invest, when you co-market, when you co-brand, when you actually look at it from a synergistic point of view. So procurement, it is really at the best position to create those relationships and nexus internally and externally.
My final question is this, because there are a large number of solutions providers who've got different pluses and minuses. When you're starting working with a new organization, where do you start? What's day one? How does that relationship build?
So first we start understanding the values, right? So you kind of have to do similar to what you do with your spouses, with your family, with your friends, right? So it's an understanding of ideology, it's an understanding of value sets to actually do the proper match. And also to make sure that directionally, right, so ambition, true north, growth, right, so that you also have similar aspirations and focus, right, so an impact that you want to create. So it's a maturity assessment, it's an evolution assessment, and you cannot be static. So it's one of those things that it needs to be nurtured, it needs to be fostered, it needs to actually be one that you spend time getting to know. And of course, you have to create an environment where people can unfilteredly say things and also receive the same quality of information. So trust is not built overnight, right? And that's the essence really on how you start. You need to start from a place of trust, give it, receive it, but also to sustain it.
Well, it's a fascinating approach. Really enjoyed your talk, and I guess if people do want to grab you afterwards, you'll be out on the floor.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your event.
Thank you.